I was asked to step down as a Sunday school teacher for not using Upsy Daisy, so I got my revenge years later. Years ago, I volunteered to teach Sunday school at a mega church in my town. The church was so large that classrooms were made available for every year of a child's life until middle school and high school, at which point they joined larger groups with similarly aged peers in separate wings of the building. I taught 2-year-olds and absolutely loved it. My classroom was packed with 20 to 25 kids for each service, and while I was supposed to have an adult co-teacher, all the other volunteers were sent to classrooms with more urgent needs. I had 2 high school-age volunteers, who were best friends. They often spent the service time playing together rather than engaging with the kids, despite my repeated requests. One of my volunteers was the director's son, and because of his position, I couldn't replace him. He clearly didn't want to be there. Despite this, and despite inheriting a huge classroom with several special needs children, my kids played calmly, sang songs, ate snacks, and followed the simple rules I set to keep the classroom running smoothly. It was a peaceful environment. However, despite this evidence of my classroom running efficiently, I was repeatedly asked by church leaders to adopt mannerisms that I found inauthentic and patronizing. They wanted me to speak in a high-pitched voice and use phrases like Upsy Daisy to engage with the kids. I refused. I do not and will not speak to anyone like that, child or adult. I was asked to step down as a Sunday school teacher for not using Upsy Daisy, so I got my revenge years later. Part 2. The requests were persistent, and it became clear that the church leadership thought I wasn't warm or welcoming enough. They wanted me to greet the children with over-the-top enthusiasm, saying things like, "I'm so glad you're here," with a huge smile and hugs. One summer day, over 50 leaders and volunteers were called into a mandatory meeting. It was the kind of meeting where you instantly know they're talking about you. The church had now formalized their stance on words like Upsy Daisy, and it was officially written into their policies. Shortly after, I was asked to step down from my role as a teacher for not using these phrases. I wasn't allowed to prepare my kids for the transition to their new Sunday teacher, and I was immediately replaced. It was crushing, and honestly, it made me question my abilities to work with kids, something I had dedicated my life to. I was asked to step down as a Sunday school teacher for not using Upsy Daisy, so I got my revenge years later. Part 3. What my church didn't know was that I had been working in early childhood intervention, teaching a classroom full of 2-year-old children who were victims of trauma and abuse, including a heavy caseload of special needs kids. One Monday, a co-worker called me over to ask what I thought of an email she had just received. It was from a church with an out-of-control 2-year-old classroom, requesting someone to consult with their new staff and help implement some new classroom techniques to manage difficult behaviors. I was asked to step down as a Sunday school teacher for not using Upsy Daisy, so I got my revenge years later. Part 4. I also wrote a strong recommendation that their written policies on classroom strategies be amended, and that staff be immediately retrained in accordance with actual therapeutic practices. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in that church. It remains one of my most deliciously cherished memories of vindication, knowing that I had turned the tables on them in the best possible way.